Go ahead.
Good morning and welcome to It Takes a Village, the importance of partners, stakeholders, and community engagement in brownfields redevelopment. This webinar is presented by the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center at NJIT for the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority and Together North Jersey. Next slide. This is the last of a 3-webinar series. Recordings of the first 2 webinars can be found on our website, www.njit.edu/njbrownfields. Next slide. I'm Colette Santasiri, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center at NJIT. Joining me in today's webinar are Frank Coughlin, Manager of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's Community Collaborative Initiative, Melissa Delinsky, Project Manager at the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center, and you'll probably hear his voice a little, Sean Vroom, who's the Director of the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center. Next slide. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items. All participants will be muted during the webinar. At any time during this webinar, if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box and make sure the setting is to all. We will leave some time towards the end of the webinar for questions. This webinar, like the previous 2, is being recorded and will be posted on the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center website. Next slide. I'm going to begin today's discussion by first speaking about the typical brownfields redevelopment scenarios. The first scenario is the private sector-led brownfields redevelopment. Private development most often occurs when a brownfield property is in an area with favorable development potential, when there is a healthy market demand for redevelopment in one or more sectors, and where the developer anticipates making an acceptable return on their investment. In this scenario, a developer is responsible for the entire redevelopment process. The developer secures the financing, completes all environmental investigations and cleanup activities if required, meeting all applicable regulations, and handles all of the pre-construction and construction activities. The second scenario is the public sector-led redevelopment, brownfields redevelopment. Public sector redevelopment typically occurs when there is little private sector interest in a property because of market factors, or when environmental conditions, parcel size, parcel configuration, or other factors limit potential redevelopment options. In this public sector-led redevelopment scenario, a local government, for instance, takes responsibility for the entire process. The municipality would take ownership of the property by voluntary purchase, foreclosure, or eminent domain, would conduct the environmental investigations and cleanup activities if required, and would handle the redevelopment activities at the site. This scenario is typical when the intended land use is public, such as a park, school, or municipal building. Or the public sector, after the environmental investigations and site cleanup are complete, may decide to sell the property to a developer or interested party. The third scenario is the public-private partnership. A public-private partnership brownfield redevelopment project occurs when there is an agreement between at least one public sector entity, such as a municipality, and one private sector organization, such as a real estate development firm, to combine resources and efforts to accomplish a common goal. Excuse me. In public-private partnerships for brownfields redevelopment, typically the public entity provides some initial funding, often for environmental site assessments and possibly contamination cleanup, and maybe for infrastructure improvements to support development. And then a private sector developer funds and manages the pre-development and construction process. Public-private partnerships often are successful because initial public investments provide the necessary incentives for private sector development. These collaborations reduce the financial burden on the public sector while accelerating property cleanup and redevelopment. And you'll understand why I just went through all of that. We talk about all different kinds of partnerships when it comes to brownfields redevelopment. Next slide, please. In the first webinar conducted in this series, I mentioned that the first step in Brownfield's blueprint is the planning phase. It's widely recognized that successful brownfield redevelopment projects are based on a foundation of sound planning practices. There's a strong connection between effective early on and continued planning with redevelopment success. And by focusing on some elemental planning steps, you can create a foundation that informs the redevelopment process and encourages a more equitable and inclusive outcome. One of the first activities that should be initiated in the planning phase that will play an important role throughout the redevelopment process is the identification of stakeholders and development of supportive partnerships. Brownfields redevelopment is a team sport, and in the planning process is all about people and collaboration. Many communities are faced with the challenges of identifying, assessing, cleaning up, and redeveloping brownfield sites. These challenges can be overwhelming, especially for communities that have multiple brownfield sites. One way to tackle these challenges is to create a brownfields task force, or you can call it a brownfields advisory committee, or whatever other name suits you. Next slide. But for the purposes of today's discussion, I'll refer to it as the Brownfields Task Force. A Brownfields Task Force is a multidisciplinary group of people with a vested interest in the cleanup and redevelopment of a community's brownfield sites. Its members bring multiple perspectives and resources to the table. Besides contamination, many brownfield-afflicted communities often face problems such as unemployment, substandard housing, and outdated infrastructure. Each of these perspectives is important in examining the depth and breadth of redevelopment, of brownfields redevelopment. The task force is a great vehicle for information sharing, generating synergy for redevelopment, and coordinating the long-lasting effects of redeveloping former industrial and commercial properties. Here are some tips for creating a brownfields task force. First, define your brownfields task force. What is the mission and objectives of the task force? These may include to steer the creation of a vision for redevelopment, to create a unified strategy for addressing brownfield sites, to create an inventory of brownfield sites and then prioritize those sites in order of redevelopment importance, to identify funding opportunities, to market the brownfield sites, to engage the community. There are many different missions and objectives of a task force. Those are just a few. Next, identify the desired task force members. And this is where you're looking at who the stakeholders are. The task force size should be large enough to represent a diversity of perspectives, but small enough to manage. We generally recommend no more than 10 or 12 members of the task force. Those invited to serve on the task force should come from different divisions of the local government and different organizations that have a vested interest in community revitalization in general, and maybe specifically in the cleanup and redevelopment of the brownfield sites. A mix of local government representatives is important because they bring different experiences with brownfield sites and, again, different perspectives. So, for instance, if you're creating a brownfields task force and you're a member of the local economic development agency or department, your perspective brownfields will probably be skewed towards economic development. But there are real or perceived public health issues connected with brownfield sites, so you might want to include someone from the municipal health department. Also, local health data is an important component of federal brownfields applications, so having the health department on your task force establishes an important relationship and resource sharing mechanism. Some brownfield sites support illegal or unwanted activities, so you might want to include a representative from the public safety department, who again will have a different perspective than you. You should also include non-government members. So what I've listed on this slide are just some potential task force members. The actual makeup of the task force will depend on community makeup and the underlying purpose of the task force. Keep in mind that the task force is only a core group of local stakeholders that are brownfields redevelopment ship, so to speak. But these relationships set the foundation for your brownfields program. Fight the urge to include every possible agency and organization. Later on in the process, you will form partnerships with other stakeholders and engage the community in other ways. Next slide. Another tip regarding the creation of a brownfields task force is once you have that task force formed, hold a kickoff event or events for the task force members. So we suggest that you have someone conduct a Brownfields educational forum for your task force. A general understanding of brownfields and the redevelopment process helps to build a common knowledge foundation amongst the task force members. The degree to which the task force members understand the brownfields redevelopment process will vary from person to person. Some might not even know what a brownfield is, and some might have a lot of experience with brownfields redevelopment. So providing some education on brownfields levels the knowledge playing field amongst your task force members. The task force members may not know where some of the brownfields in town are located. You might want to arrange a tour of the community's brownfield sites, even if it's just a drive-by of the sites, so the task force members become acquainted with the different types of brownfields in your community. The New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center can help you create the structure of your task force, walk you through all the steps of doing that, as well as conduct what we call a Brownfields Basic or webinar for your task force members. Next slide. Navigating the road to brownfields redevelopment success can be complex and challenging. Developing relationships and meaningful partnerships are critical to success. So this is where I'm now going beyond that brownfields task force, and we're reaching out to other stakeholders in the community. The redevelopment of brownfields generally requires more stakeholder participation than the typical real estate transaction because of a number of factors, including possibly the complex history of the site, or concerns about human health and the environment, or difficulty getting finance, or various desires for site reuse. And the cost of redeveloping a contaminated property often extends beyond local resources, and as such necessitates partnering. Partners bring resources. Partnerships, communication, and build bridges between the relevant stakeholders. They can dispel uncertainty and galvanize community support. Next slide. I've listed some of the typical stakeholders that you can partner with. I'll give you some examples of those partnerships. Again, this is typical. It really is going to depend on the makeup of your particular community. The federal government, for instance, is a great partner to have because they bring both funding, assistance, and expertise. For example, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, has a brownfield program that includes several different grants that can be used for planning activities, site assessment, and cleanup of contaminated sites. The EPA also offers technical assistance to communities. Another partner includes the state environmental and economic development agencies. They bring important resources to brownfields redevelopment. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection can help stakeholders understand the laws and regulations that govern the cleanup of contaminated sites. And JDEP also provides funding, and as you'll hear in a few minutes from Frank McLaughlin, DEP provides assistance to certain municipalities through its Community Collaborative Initiative. Another example is the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. The New Jersey EDA is just about to launch a brownfields loan program, so there'll be funding available. EDA also financially supports the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center and DEP's Community Collaborative Initiative, both of which bring resources and expertise to brownfields redevelopment. An example of the resources a local government can bring to a brownfields redevelopment project is funding. As an example, local governments can apply EPA brownfields funds and use that money to conduct environmental investigations of a site. When a local government is able to determine the type and extent of the contamination and provide that information to potential developers, that reduces the risk to developers and may attract more developer interest to the site. Another role that local government can play is in upgrading the public realm and infrastructure at or near the brownfield site. This action can also serve to make the site more attractive to developers. Real estate development professionals, including developers and real estate agents, are also excellent partners. They can help you understand the realities of your real estate market. They can identify which types of incentives would make more local brownfield redevelopment projects economically viable and help generate interest in your brownfields. Another partner is faith-based organizations who oftentimes are centerpieces in communities, both physically and emotionally. Faith leaders often serve as leaders for congregants and community members and have an institutional knowledge of the community and its history. The leaders can serve as a resource for garnering interest in and disseminating information about brownfield sites and redevelopment. Faith institutions can also serve as community-based centers to hold community engagement activities, especially in neighborhoods where public transportation is not convenient and many citizens may not have cars. Faith leaders are often skilled at dispute resolution and other methods of negotiation and help facilitate discussions amongst stakeholders. Partnership with colleges and universities can be valuable for brownfields redevelopment. By partnering with a college or university, you can gain insight and expertise on brownfields related topics. Professors, researchers, and grad students can supply knowledge. Some colleges and universities hold design studios in which students work on real development projects. Professors designing public affairs courses, students developing research projects, or civic-minded students looking for an interesting volunteer experience can all contribute to brownfields projects. And in New Jersey, the New Jersey Institute of Technology, through its New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center, provides free technical assistance to the public sector. So these are just a few examples of some of the stakeholders that you can partner with. Again, it really depends on the makeup of your community. But what I suggest is that you go beyond the usual suspects, the usual partners. For example, look to your local arts and cultural institutions. They can be great partners in bringing attention to brownfield sites, suggesting creative ways to engage the community in envisioning what these sites can be transformed into, and creatively marketing the sites. If the arts organization is a trusted entity in the community, they can also help foster collaboration between the community and the local government and developer. So again, these are just some suggestions on who your partners can be and what partnerships, what those partners bring to the table. So next slide. Before I turn the program over to Frank, I want to give you a quick overview of things to think about when you want to engage your community around redevelopment activities. Engaging your community starts in the planning process and should continue throughout the redevelopment phase. I'm going to touch upon the process of engaging your community. Educating the community on redevelopment, on brownfields, garnering their input as to community needs and how those needs may be met through the redevelopment of the sites, and soliciting their input regarding the ultimate redevelopment of the sites should all be part of the community engagement process. But there's no one-size-fits-all approach to engaging your community. As every community is different and every community's needs are different, it's critical that you construct a thorough and thoughtful plan before you engage. The answers to the following questions will help inform your community engagement plan. So the first question you ask is, who is the community? Remember that communities are diverse in age, gender, background, socioeconomics, mobility, and education attainment. Careful consideration in identifying who the community is needed. Another question you should ask is, why are you engaging the community? What's the purpose? What do you hope to achieve? Answers to these questions will help you determine the methods you select for engaging your community. Another question to ask when you're preparing your engagement plan is, how will you engage the community? There's many different tools and techniques available. We suggest that you explore the variety and research how other communities have successfully used these methods. Then select the methods appropriate to your community. When will you engage the community? It's recommended that you engage your community throughout the entire brownfields process, from planning through redevelopment. But through the process, you may have different reasons to engage your community, and you may choose different methods to use at different times. The final question to ask while you're developing this community engagement plan is what will you do with the results of engagement? How will you incorporate community feedback into the planning for and redevelopment of your brownfield sites? Your community wants to be heard and feel that their input is valued, so feedback to the community and follow through are critical. One final thought I'll leave you with concerning community engagement is this: successful community engagement empowers citizens. They feel valued. It elevates community spirit, that we're all in this together feeling. It strengthens social inclusion because you will be reaching out to not only the people who usually get involved, but to the others in the community whose voice is just as important. And it contributes to meaningful change, ensuring that the ultimate redevelopment meets the needs and the wants of the community. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn the program over to Frank McLaughlin, the manager of the Community Collaborative Initiative at DEP. Frank is going to show you how some New Jersey communities have engaged stakeholders and formed beneficial partnerships for their brownfields redevelopment work. Welcome, Frank.
Hi, Colette. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in the webinar. And that's some great background that you gave on partnering with communities where your brownfield sites are located. So a little bit about me. I am an employee of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for 32 years, about 17 of it doing brownfields work. Most of my work started in Camden, New Jersey, and I will speak a lot about some examples of building partnerships and engaging community from my experience in Camden. I currently manage a program called the Community Collaborative Initiative, where there are DEP staff liaisons dedicated to specific cities across the state. And there are 12 cities that we currently serve. So in addition to some of the classic brownfield work that our office does, brownfield development areas, hazardous discharge site remediation grants, landfill redevelopment, things like that. I manage this section called the Community Collaborative Initiative, and we'll be speaking about that in this webinar. Next slide. So sometimes, you know, at DEP, we talk about either community engagement or community enragement. And there are many examples of community enragement, and we're not gonna talk about some of those things because there's better ways to do things. And cultivating partnerships early and engaging the community early in your brownfield redevelopment project is a good way to have a project go successful, both meeting your time frames and also achieving the successes that you hope to achieve in that project. So you're coming into someone's neighborhood when you do your project, and sometimes that perspective is lost. You may think, well, we're coming in and we're taking over a blighted property, and that's terrific, right? But you also are coming into someone's neighborhood, and if someone came into your neighborhood with a wonderful development, you would want to review it and understand it too, and be engaged. So think about that perspective when you're doing your project. You're coming into someone else's neighborhood. That neighborhood may also have a history of inequity, whether it's social or environmental injustices. So there may be a history there as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in my presentation. Again, we're going to emphasize this, but Colette talked about early engagement, and early engagement with the right partners is really going to be your best way to find success, and also not just finding success of your project, but also strengthening the community, and also maybe help help your project by leveraging other partners, unusual suspects, as Colette well said, and also other partners that may leverage or co-invest with you or invest just outside your project that would add value to your project. So all these things are reasons that you want to cultivate partnerships and engage the community early, understand the community, and also make your project even more valuable to yourself and to the community that you're doing the project in. So we're going to talk about how we think a little more broadly than the site, to think about things like multiple use solutions, things where your redevelopment not only can clean up a site, but may be able to do something else, like say stormwater management, which may be a problem locally. Building safe, being part of building a safe corridor for students to get to schools, or a trail towards an open space, or maybe waterfront access. So all these things are what we call multiple use solutions, and your site may be able to benefit the community as well as benefiting your development. So we want to think a little more broad than the site. A lot of times, leveraging of infrastructure improvements is possible with your project, not only on the site, but maybe even adjacent to your site. So that's a good idea to maybe engage your government partners to look for transportation improvements, water improvements, energy improvements, things like that. And also, another reason why we want to cultivate partnerships and engage the communities, because there may be local complementary projects that you can build upon, not only at your site, but also working with partners. Say a park is coming in. Say there's other development that is occurring in that same neighborhood, and you're going to want to be aware of that, and may make your project even better, because it'll fit into the emerging character of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Are we able to turn it to the next slide? Thank you. There are a lot of support for brownfield redevelopment in the state, and I'm only going to be able to touch on a few of these things to keep it brief, but I'll be happy to answer questions along with Colette at the end of the webinar to answer any specific questions you have. You should be aware of Governor Murphy's strategic economic plan for the state. Brownfields is an important part of building stronger and fairer communities and a stronger and fairer economy in New Jersey. So you should be aware of this overriding strategic plan that the governor put out 2 years ago. There is also a stronger movement towards environmental justice and equity in the state, led by the governor again. Early in his administration, Executive Order 23 came out. Recently, the DEP put forth an environmental justice guidance document early fall. And if your brownfield site is in a environmental justice community or a community that has been underserved, these are documents and orders that you may want to be familiar with. In September, the governor signed an environmental justice bill, the first of its kind in the nation, that will give DEP the authority to deny permits for projects that add to environmental stressors in an already overburdened community. Now, the regulations will be written over the next year, so a lot more to come on that. But it's a pretty powerful tool. But I think there's good news here, and cultivating partnerships and engaging the community in environmental justice areas is going to be a benefit to your brownfield project, because brownfields are one of the environmental stressors in our overburdened communities. The last thing I'll briefly touch on is climate change and resiliency. In June of this year, the DEP put out a scientific report on climate change. It talks about sea level rise. It talks about more extreme precipitation events. It talks about the climate changing as far as making cities less comfortable and less healthy in the summer because of heat stress. It's a pretty sobering report and worth your read if you are interested in resiliency, and your project, one of your project goals is building resiliency. There's going to be a series of changes to some specific regulations, particularly in land use, things like the Freshwater Wetlands Act, the Flood Hazard Rules, the Coastal Zone Management Act, all are going to be changed, directed by the governor in Executive Order 100, so New Jersey builds resiliency and plans for climate change and appropriate adaptation to climate change. Next slide. So Colette touched on this, but understand the community that you're working in, the people and the issues. That is really the first step in building strong partners and engaging the community. So I worked in Camden for many years as a basically as first as a brownfield development area project manager, and then act as a liaison to help them beyond brownfields. And that was really the impetus for the Community Collaborative Initiative that I manage now. So like other cities, Camden, New Jersey is a diverse city, has 21 census tracts. You see the colorful map in front of you there. Initially, I worked in two neighborhoods the most, the Kramer Hill neighborhood, the farthest north, and the North Camden neighborhood in the northwest side to the upper left on your screen. And the Kramer Hill neighborhood had some of the most significant chronic stormwater flooding problems that I had ever seen. And there's a picture of it there on the upper left. And to go into that community, even working on a brownfield site, without acknowledging the severe chronic repetitive flooding is just a huge mistake. And also that if you're building a brownfield site in an area that floods, I mean, you'd want to know that too. So not only is it a benefit to knowing the community better, but it's also maybe a benefit to your site. There's a picture of this of the neighborhood of North Camden there with if you have better eyes than me, that's the Ben Franklin Bridge in the background. And North Camden is a community that has been undergoing depopulation since the 1920s, when the businesses there, the ferry and water-dependent businesses, shut down because of the building of the Ben Franklin Bridge, by the way, and transportation to Philadelphia was done by car and truck and bus instead of by ship. So that community, brownfields and vacant residential lots were its priority, as well as accessing the waterfront there. Other communities that I've worked in the past number of years, Waterfront South, the community was very upset at the undesirable land uses and whether companies were complying with their air, water, and land use permits. And so really they wanted a heavier hand from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection and help from the local government to stop citing things like scrap metal recycling facilities in that neighborhood. Another neighborhood I worked in, the Whitman Park neighborhood in the southeastern side of the city, that's the I'm showing you an image in the lower right there. That community had brownfield sites that were correlated with illegal dumping and other illegal activities. So in addition to being just a blight, it was attracting illegal activities beyond even illegal dumping. So so that community's focus was stabilizing brownfield sites and working on an illegal dumping problem and working on the safety of the neighborhood. So the take-home message is understand the community that you're working in, the people and the issues, because if you want to build some strong, lasting partners, you also want to address their local concerns. And I call that finding mutual goals, and that's really what your objective should be if you want your project to go successfully and on a timetable that works for you. Next slide. Well, there are a lot of, one of your partners should be government agencies. We talked about leveraging, and there's a lot of monies available for infrastructure. We have a water bank at DEP. There's a transportation trust fund. There are a lot of government agencies that are looking to help you in your quest for brownfields, and I collected a really good job of covering many of those. And in the to keep the talk from going too long, I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards about government agencies. Next slide, please. There's a lot of environmental expertise out there. Colette also touched on those. I would just add things like licensed site remediation professionals. New Jersey has a licensed site professional program, and these professionals are the local experts on your site, but they're also experts in other sites around your project. There's also an association that can help you with some questions, the Licensed Site Remediation Professional Association. There's academic institutions. Colette mentioned her organization, NJIT's Brownfield Assistance Center. In my project in Camden, I've worked very closely with Rutgers University, several different departments at Rutgers, the Center for Urban Environmental Sustainability, the Blaustein School, and my longest relationship with Rutgers is with their Water Resources Cooperative Extension Program. I've been working with them for over 10 years on green infrastructure projects in Camden. We also talked about nonprofit organizations or collected, and one of them that I work with closely is the Brownfield Coalition of the Northeast. But there are many local, national, and state environmental organizations with a lot of expertise. In Camden, we've worked very closely with the Trust for Public Land and the New Jersey Conservation Foundation in park redevelopment and other projects. Next slide. So when we talk about knowing the community, in Camden, from very early on in managing brownfield projects there, chronic repetitive stormwater flooding, and not just stormwater flooding, it was combined sewer overflow flooding as well. So a health issue as well as just an awful inconvenience and nuisance. Brownfields were a great solution for local stormwater flooding. So we were able, with early community engagement, to build a lot of strong partners around using brownfields to manage stormwater. And really amazing, we started an initiative called the Camden Smart Initiative, that stands for Stormwater Management and Resource Training. almost a decade ago, and it's become a national model for community-based green infrastructure because of our community engagement. When we did brownfield sites in Camden, we asked about local stormwater flooding, and there's a gas station. That was our first project done about 10, 11 years ago, where literally we cut the curbs and stormwater flows from the streets onto this small pocket park called Waterfront South Rain Gardens Park in the Waterfront South neighborhood of Camden. So what was a blighted site you see to your left became not only a nice green space, but also managing stormwater in that same neighborhood. Next slide. Back to the Kramer Hill neighborhood, where I did a lot of my early work in the city of Camden. In addition to stormwater flooding, the Kramer Hill residents and local partners have a beautiful river right next to them, the Delaware River. And over 2 miles of this neighborhood borders on the Delaware River, and there was no access. So in addition to managing stormwater better, the community wanted to access the beautiful river. There was an 86-acre landfill in the way called the Harrison Avenue landfill. And we were able to, with a lot of state and some federal funding, transform a 24-acre parcel of that to the Salvation Army Kroc Community Center. That was a project that took about 8 years to do. And not only did we start the process of providing access, that was the first project in Camden not to tie into the combined sewer system. So that was sustainably redeveloped to manage stormwater on the site instead of adding to the stormwater. So not only is it an amazing project that serves over 8,000 area residents, it also doesn't contribute to the chronic flooding in that neighborhood. The phase 2 portion of the landfill reclamation is a 62-acre park and habitat restoration. That's at the bottom of your screen. That park will open next year, and I'm happy to speak about it more during our Q&A. But this is a story about robust community engagement, where we met iteratively with community stakeholders and empowered them with information and decision making. So not all projects are this big or this complicated, but if you can engage the community and share information, explain their options, empower them in the decision making, you can have successful community engagement that lasts 16, 17 years that it took for this site to go from being investigated to the park opening next summer. Next slide. This is the illegal dump, one of the illegal dumping sites in the Whitman Park neighborhood, and there are some of our partners. And again, some of your non-traditional partners can be some of your strongest partners. In this project, the Camden Department of Public Works and the Camden County Metro Police were critical in stabilizing this site so we could remediate it for a park. Next slide. And another interest that that local partners have with you and hopefully your project, and of course the DEP, is building resilience in our communities. The upper picture is a picture of the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority, the third largest wastewater treatment plant in the state. Why would we partner with them? Well, they've been an amazing partner. We've co-invested just in water bank monies, or used to be called Environmental Infrastructure Trust Fund, over $250 million in the last decade with the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority. And that was our key partner in managing or better managing stormwater across the city. In addition to their citywide strong partnership, we also are building community resiliency. You may be able, if you have better eyes than me, there's solar panels on that wastewater treatment plant. They beneficially reuse methane from the sludge to generate a lot of heat at that wastewater treatment plant. And we have designs and soon to build a resilient waterfront based on vegetation and freshwater mussel systems, which are adaptable to sea level rise, very much like the oyster systems in saltwater bodies. So, and again, that neighborhood, their key was reconnecting them to the waterfront. This was the original shipbuilding neighborhood in Camden City, but it did not, this neighborhood as well did not have meaningful public access. So that was an environmental injustice and one that we could solve. And we partner with the CCMUA, the county government, the state government, the city government to do that project. And some of the pictures there before and after are on the bottom of your screen. Next slide. This is a park that my former colleague, who's now my boss, stayed in Perth Amboy, or is doing in Perth Amboy. This is a 2nd Street Park project. The city and Rutgers had done a lot of community engagement, and we have now backed that conceptual plan with funding from DEP to get it done. And it, again, is one of these projects that have multiple use benefits. Next slide. This is a project adjacent to 2nd Street Park in Perth Amboy, a 92-acre former steel site. And my boss and colleague, Bill Lindner, literally spoke to the redeveloper the day after the redeveloper purchased that 92-acre site. The day after. So in addition to a great economic development project of over 600 jobs, that large site is doing green infrastructure, stormwater management. Perth Amboy is another city with combined sewer overflows. They're also building an amphitheater there. They're allowing access to the waterfront and connection to other open space and to transit from this one site. So again, it's an amazing project, but working with the DEP and local stakeholders, we've done all these other additional great things like green infrastructure, amphitheater for the community to enjoy on the waterfront, connection to the waterfront, and connection to open space and transit too. Next slide. Here are some of the economic development projects we've done in Camden, and really kind of ironic and amazing that what started as Camden's war of flooding and the benefits we did using brownfield sites set the stage for some great economic development projects. And of course, there are many other funding streams beyond DEP on some of these projects, but the war on water and our success in managing stormwater led to the American Waters World Headquarters to come to Camden 3 years ago. That's the aquarium and the Walt Whitman Bridge in the far distance. And a just opened project in Camden, the Resentec World Headquarters. Resentec does medical grade water products, And again, 27 acres of brownfield sites have been reused, and 700 to 800 jobs are coming to Camden. But there's about 400 now, and about 700 to 800 when it's fully built out. So again, these are stories of engaging the community early and building strong partnerships early, because again, your site is in a neighborhood with folks who care about that land, and there's partners out there that are willing not only to support your project, but also to potentially leverage other assets and finances to make your project even better. Next slide. We don't have really time. I wanted to get the questions and they're collected, so I'm not going to be able to talk about the Community Collaborative Initiative. Next slide. Thank you. Colette and I and Sean and Melissa are available for questions.
So next slide, please. So Frank, thank you so much. One thing that I heard you say very loud and clear is multiple solutions require multiple partners. And that is very obvious in Camden and Perth Amboy and other communities. So before we get to the Q&A, and I just want to remind everyone to type in your questions in the Q&A box. Before we get to that, I just wanted to give you a real quick overview of the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center and how we can help you. The New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center at NJIT is the first of its kind and only center that solely focuses and serves New Jersey. It is a free resource to the state's county and local governments. The center's team of professionals includes planners, engineers, environmental scientists, and social scientists who have experience helping hundreds of communities from across the country overcome their brownfield challenges. We have a resource center that includes a website containing many tools and guidance. We also post valuable information on our social media platforms. Next slide. A key feature of the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center is our Brownfields Help Desk. You can reach us by phone or email. Here's where our personal assistance begins, and we tailor that assistance to your community's needs. So if you have a quick Brownfields related question or in need of some one-on-one assistance or guidance, give us a call or email us. Even if you're not sure of what type of assistance you need, that's fine. Call us anyway, and through the course of a conversation with you, we can understand what your challenges are, and we can also offer different ways that we can assist you. Next slide. So I'm going to turn this over to Melissa. She's been looking at the questions that you've been posting, and she can let us know what some of those questions are. Let me just say that we did begin this webinar a few minutes late, so we will go beyond the 12 o'clock hour, which we're all fine with. As long as you want to hang on and ask us questions, we're here to answer them. So, Melissa?
Okay, so we have a few questions. I'll go through them. So the first question came from Joseph. It's, when is the Kramer Hill Golf Course scheduled to be opened?
Oh, well, Joseph, there is going to be no Kramer Hill Golf Course. That was a plan, a concept plan offered in about 2003 by a former developer that was interested in working in Camden. Actually, the Harrison Avenue landfill, where the Kroc Center and the Kramer Hill Waterfront Park are now, was the conceptual area where the Kramer Hill Golf Course was going to be, but the community did not support a golf course on that landfill. So there again, about early community engagement is important.
Okay, we have another question from Richard. He has a few. So this question is about eliminating stormwater and how you were able to do that.
Oh, I may have misspoke in my zeal for connecting multiple use solutions and brownfields and stormwater management. We can't, of course, eliminate stormwater, right? Because even in natural environments, when there's heavy rain, saturated soils, frozen soils, or impermeable soils, right? There's runoff. But in Camden, it was about taking the stormwater off the streets and not adding stormwater to the combined sewage, right? So it was finding a different path for the stormwater, taking the stormwater off streets and sites and letting it infiltrate back into the ground like it does in the natural setting. So eliminating stormwater, I overspoke there. We were managing stormwater by greening the city. I mean, this amazing program we've been on in Camden where we're naturalizing a sewer shed. And that's where green and gray infrastructure and overlaying them is really important. And as most of you know, brownfield sites have a lot of impervious surface coverage or compacted soil. So they make great solutions to not only managing sustainably your stormwater on your project, but maybe even helping out the local streets as well. And that's been our goal in Camden. So I misspoke a little bit if I said eliminating stormwater. It's better management of stormwater.
Okay, next, Kathleen had a question about an image. I'm not sure which slide that was. And then she had a question about kayaks. So I'm not 100% sure what slide she's referring to.
I think I know what she's talking about. And Richard also had a question. I was showing the American Water World Headquarters, and that is a ferry actually there in front of the aquarium that goes over to Penn's Landing in Philadelphia. So that's what that is. I think if I didn't answer your question, Kathleen.
Yeah, feel free to, for Kathleen, feel free to ask it in a different way in the chat. So I just had a few questions I thought maybe would help the participants. So one of the things is common pitfalls. Like, what are some of the experiences that you have with communities that are actively trying to engage but fall into like maybe some of the most common pitfalls and go in the wrong direction a little bit, and how do you get back on track?
Go ahead, Colette.
Oh, so I think the biggest common mistake is to go in a community and say, this is what we're doing, rather than going into a community and saying, what are your needs? What are your wants? What are the circumstances within this community? So going in with a preconceived, solution without listening to the community is probably the biggest mistake. And I think that's a mistake that is really hard to undo, because when you go into a community and say, this is what we're doing without even talking to them, then there's no trust. And community engagement is all about trust building.
Yeah, I would add, you're right on, Colette, and I would add, lacking, situational awareness, lacking, being tone deaf. Let's be clear about this, right? You go to a community and your project's going to add trucks, for instance, right? And the community is enraged because there's a lot of trucks. And I'm thinking Newark, right, where Colette is normally stationed non-COVID, right? If you go to do a project in Newark near the port and don't talk about trucks, mm-hmm. you just don't understand the ironbound community. So anyway, do your homework, understand the community and its people, and get off to a good foot, as Colette mentioned.
This is Sean. The one other thing I'd also add is that I think it's important to go in there and, give a perception that you genuinely are interested in the feedback and input that you are getting from a community. You don't want to go in and give them the impression that you're kind of just going through the motions because it's a requirement for the effort that they're undertaking. There's nothing you can do worse to turn off a community than to be, they're just running through the motions just to say they did it. And it's not really going to meaningfully be incorporated into the project. So that would be my one thing to add.
That's a great point, Sean. And we're talking about meaningful community engagement. That means sharing information. That means transparency. That means they have a seat at the table for site decisions. To the extent that's practical, right? There's some decisions that a professional has to make, right? Maybe with remediation, but the community should have meaningful participation in the process. And so that's a very good point, Sean. Meaningful community engagement is what we're talking about, empowering them in decision making.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So one more thing I was thinking of was, what is the best first step that someone can take to engage their community?
Show up, right? Be there and keep showing up, right? You get off to the right step. You've done your homework. You know the community. You know the demographics. You may know some of the history. Show up and listen, right? As a state environmental agency, we do a lot of regulation, and that's fine in many instances, right? When we're looking at the water quality coming out of a pipe or the air quality coming out of a stack. But in the brownfields world, listening and showing up are very important, and knowing your community.
Melissa, I believe Kathleen
Yes, so
provided
there's,
what she was looking for. So if we want to go back to Frank's slides, I'm pretty sure I know what she's looking at.
yep, so it's that Perth Amboy question about the waterfront.
I'm not sure if it was Perth Amboy or Camden, but I'll know which one. Keep going. Right, stop. Go forward. Go forward. Right there. The lower left. I think, Kathleen, this is what you were looking for. Yeah, she said bingo. It's the lower left picture, the gray building. She wants to know what that is.
Oh, the gray building lower left?
Yeah, it's this year.
That is that's ENR, former Camden Iron and Metal, the gray building to the left. The on the right in the beige area is a 5-acre site called Phoenix Park, which was the first meaningful access to the community. That's after we removed the building, which is in your lower left. That's what that site looked like, and a lot of impervious surface coverage. You see the stormwater running off actually into the river in that instance. But that's Phoenix Park, which was part of our environmental justice work, and in front of the CCMOA is resiliency. But far to the right and far to the left, there's private businesses. But Phoenix Park does have a kayak launch, by the way. So, and there's a local, one of our partners is a local charter school called Urban Promise Academy, and they build boats in South Camden, and they launch boats there. So it's another unexpected or unusual partner that Colette talked about, but they really wanted a park and waterfront access, just like the community. And they built the boats to help highlight that park.
And that's a great example of a stakeholder that you don't see in every community. So you really need to know your community when you're identifying who the different stakeholders are. I think Kathleen also had a question about Perth Amboy waterfront. Is there also kayak rentals?
If you go down maybe 2 slides, maybe 3 or 4 slides. Okay, yeah, let's use this one. Back to the last one you just had. Right there. Okay. So if you look to this is the Jordeau Steel site, the North Jersey coastline that goes down to Bay Head, that goes through Perth Amboy, is actually cuts the slide right next to that long rectangular, which is 2nd Street Park. There is a beach in front of 2nd Street Park, and then as we head basically east towards Raritan Bay, Perth Amboy is where the Raritan River and the Arthur Kill meet to form the Raritan Bay, and there are sailing schools there that have sailboats and other stuff. So I'm sure there's kayak launchings there as well, but there is sailing schools there in Perth Amboy, and unfortunately there's CSO outfalls as well. So but people are using that resource. People congregate at that beach. That's a beautiful area where the 2 rivers meet to form Raritan Bay, and there's a lot of sailing, including sailing instruction from schools, and high schools around the state come down to Perth Amboy to race through sailboats in Raritan Bay. Did that answer your question, Kathleen?
I think it did, because she wrote bingo in the comments. One thing that Kathleen mentioned was billboards and being creative with your community engagement. So I was wondering what you guys have seen that you thought was the most creative type of community engagement.
I'll answer really quick, and Colette can answer, maybe Sean as well. But early in my days in this Kramer Hill neighborhood, we were doing this Croc Community Center project on the former Harrison Avenue landfill. I went to another number of evening community meetings, and two local nonprofits, Cooper's Ferry Partnership and the Kramer Hill Community Development Corporation, gave monopoly money to people and let them spend the monopoly money on their biggest issues. And we counted the money at the end of the community session. And that brought home that flooding was their number one issue. They wanted access, they wanted open space, they wanted jobs and public safety, things like that, but stop the flooding. And that really brought it home to me. And, I'm a fan of Monopoly, so I guess, I thought that was a really cool thing. That wasn't my idea, but it really stuck with me. And every time I worked on a brownfield site in that neighborhood, I thought about stormwater because of that.
So there's, when it comes to community engagement, there's high tech and there's low tech. It's combinations, again, one of the things that I said is throughout your community development process, you may be using different types of mechanisms to engage the community. So some things that I've seen is, whoever's handling the community engagement would say to their community members, tell us something that you love about this community, or tell us, or if they're dealing with a particular site, tell us what you don't like about this site, or what you imagine this site could be redeveloped as. And they'll ask for those comments via postcards, so low tech, and then take all of those postcards with the answers and display them in the library or the municipal building. So now the whole community can look at what everybody's thinking about and what their answers were. And now it starts to generate a conversation. You can do this a little more high tech, where you ask the same kind of questions, but you ask people to text the answer. So now hopefully you're getting people like my children, who rather be on a phone than writing out a postcard. So they'll text the answer. And then, whoever's handling this community engagement will take all of those answers and then display them for everyone. So this is outside of your typical community engagement meeting, where you're trying to get to a lot of different members of the community and reach them in different ways. So there's a lot of really good examples of different ways to engage the community. I'm thinking that we're probably nearing the end. I don't know if there's any more questions that we should answer, that are there that we can answer. Otherwise, maybe we should wrap this up. Melissa, are there any other questions?
I think we've addressed everything. So
okay, well then I want to thank Frank for joining us today. Thanks to Sean and Melissa for helping us out today. And thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate that you took the time to spend with us today. Hopefully you've learned things. Hopefully we've given you some things to think about. And again, the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center at NJIT is here to help you. So email us or call us with your questions. I want to wish you all good health and a very happy Thanksgiving. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.